Welcome to Finance in the Clouds. Modern finance is broken, forcing finance and accounting teams to work like it's 1985, the year Excel was invented. Here, we talk about the struggles finance teams face in fast-growing companies and discuss how they can spend less time catching up and more time in the clouds. I'm your host, Jake Jones, multimedia producer and brand influencer at Zone & Co., and I'm joined this week by Tyler Santos, Director of NetSuite Development, and Joe Scavotto, Manager of Solution Consulting, both here at Zone & Co. Thanks for joining me today, guys. Real excited to have you.
Thanks for having us, Jake.
Thanks, Jake. Looking forward to it.
Automation can help take the busy work out of a lot of jobs, including jobs in finance. But is this tech reliable? Today, we are talking all about automation in finance and how you can use it to help your business grow. So Tyler, Joe, I'm really excited to get into this topic, talk about automation. Even before we started recording, we were having some really enlightening conversations. So this is going to be a great podcast. But first, I wanted to give you guys some space to talk about who you are and what you do for us here at Zone. So Tyler, why don't you start?
Sure. Again, thanks so much for having us. My name's Tyler Santos. I run our engineering team here at Zone & Co. So we kind of build solutions for our finance customers to, automate their business processes and kind of increase their productivity.
Great. Joe, tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm Joe Scavotto. I run this pre-sales solution consulting team here at Zone. So doing demonstrations, the products that Tyler and his team have built kind of over the period of time, and really help companies show how we can help optimize the company's business.
Again, really excited to have you both on today. The first question I want to ask you guys and just kind of talk about, we talk a lot about automation being the future of finance. And so is automation the future of finance in y'all's opinion?
So the quick and easy of it is, I think, absolutely, right? So if we look over the last couple decades, finance and accounting used to be ledgers and books that people would keep in their office, and you'd have a bunch of people that trying to manage and remember numbers and audit those numbers across those books. And that obviously wasn't an efficient thing. So over the last couple of decades, we've seen people start to use computers to really start to track that, whether that was computers locally in their office. And now we've seen a big migration to the cloud over the last 10 years of all of that data and all of those systems, so that more people have access to it. There's more visibility and there's more information, and it's a little more efficient. But if we look moving forward, specifically in finance, there's a lot of processes, whether it is, day-to-day transactions coming through, or you have, your month-end close process, or even your auditing processes quarterly or annually. There is kind of checklists there of things that need to be done. And those are all opportunities to increase efficiency and not rely on, people to have to do that work if, computers and systems can pick up the heavy lifting.
Years ago, manual journal entries that were ultimately taking place, but now being able to scale up, have more real-time visibility, not have to always wait to month end to look at your numbers, right? That is really helping companies with that automation to be able to know, halfway through the month, how am I looking, right? Something happened at the beginning of the month that could change the rest of the whole period. But if you're having to wait on individuals who could be in a month and a half delay to enter that information, you're not going to have that visibility. When I think about automation, I really think of it as giving people the opportunity to actually do some additional insight of what's actually happening, right? When you have to enter in data very arduously every single month or every single period, or check manually a number of different boxes, well, you're missing out on an opportunity of, was there a trend in place? Is there something that I could have been more alerted to because something happened? But if you can know that in real time, you can make maybe inventory changes, you can make changes right then and there, as opposed to kind of waiting for end of period, maybe some companies end of quarter. And that could be, a month and a half away.
Let's talk about what are some financial processes that can be automated in NetSuite and maybe even other ERP systems. What are some of those financial processes we can automate already?
If we look at the kind of the verticals of what makes up a finance department, right? You have like accounts receivable, accounts payable, you have billing. So on the accounts receivable side, payments and the collection of funds and tracking those funds is something that with today's technologies, whether it's payment providers, ACH payment automations with the banks, things like that. The tracking of those funds can be easily done and communicated from your external sources like your banks into your ERP so that you are aware of how much money is in your accounts, do that audit and make sure that your collections are all set. And then other things like accounts payable. Doing business is nothing more than doing more business with other people. And in order to do that, you need to, maintain those relationships and pay people out. But, managing what is due and when can be complicated when you receive different types of bills in different places. And there's a lot of ways in which you can automate those collections and make sure that you're not paying vendors too much or too little. And then on the billing side, actually charging your customers, there's ways to make sure that we can track the contractual amounts that you have with your customers and make sure that it's reliable and predictable.
Yeah, one in particular is just bank reconciliation. Right? I remember the days as a former auditor actually seeing controllers like one by one, checking the box, say, hey, this matches over here, this is on the bank statement, here it isn't closed out. And that was a lengthy process. So even if a company only has 100 bank transactions a month, right, how does that actually flow? Right, was Tyler was talking about with the ability to integrate with your payment processors and in your banks, that just makes that matching so much easier. So now you're managing by exception. Instead of looking at a company with maybe a higher volume, 1,000 line items per month, right? That just gives you that more visibility. What happens if there's a batch payment, like a large ACH payment that cleared the bank? How does that reconcile with the 100 transactions that actually happen in your ERP? Right. And that was always, I remember auditing a company, it was so hard to ask them, like, well, what's this made up of? What's this payment made up of? And it literally took them like a week to figure it out because they had to go talk to 5 different people in different departments to see where the source of it actually came through. Tyler was talking about the billing side of the house from the AR, and it's billing the customer their contracted amount. Maybe it's a monthly minimum, but we've seen a lot of times as companies aren't always charging the minimum because they don't have an automated way of tracking it. It's potentially lost revenue that you're just sitting out on the books because even though the contract said we're going to bill you $10,000 a month, well, I have no way to compare that against what actually happened for the period, right? So it's automating those things, and like I said, managing by exception.
I think to add to that, Joe, I think you just reminded me of a really great example of, we know in the finance world, like everybody in a finance department, their task list is not small, like they are busy all the time. And as businesses change, especially as agile as businesses are, in this era, they are constantly going to market with new business models or new ways to do those contracts. At the end of the day, if the sales marketing team or whoever wants to go to market with a new go-to-market model, they'll go, oh yeah, we're going to do this. And somebody in finance will, audit this spreadsheet at the end of the month, and they'll reconcile the numbers. And it's an afterthought, right? Putting in the systems that support your processes so that you can be more flexible, even more upstream in your funnel into your go-to-market strategy really kind of supports the goal of finance, which is to support the business.
That's amazing to hear all the things that can be done. And I know we're going to talk more about how you can really take advantage of some of these automations that do exist. And so I'm excited to get to that. But kind of a question that sparked this whole topic for me was just this question of how reliable are these automations? I told you guys before we started recording, I have some smart lights in my house that I've automated a couple times to turn on at 8 o'clock and shut off at 5 or whatever. And 9 times out of 10, they work. But there's always just that 1 or 2 times that it fails. And I'm sure it's something on my part. User error is obviously a factor there. But back to that question, how reliable are these automations when it comes to what you can do through NetSuite and some of these other ERP systems?
As a very general statement, most things can be automated, but there is one large dependency, and that's kind of what your data is or what your input is. And, we see with customers that we work with all the time that are particularly large and they're trying to grow their businesses, they want to automate these processes. The crippling component is really the data. Is that dirty? And where is that coming from? That's kind of the dependency there. If you put bad stuff in, you're going to get bad stuff out, right? And we can architect ways to make sure that we can cleanse things along the way, but that's the biggest dependency. If the data goes in, then we can create predictable flows of automation about what is going to happen given certain business rules and criteria related to your finance processes. But if the data isn't unpredictable, that's where you're going to get the light bulb's not going to turn on. that 1 out of 10 times.
I love that. That's such a great way to think about it, of you're going to get what you put into it. If you can really kind of streamline it early on, and as you said, kind of clean it up as you go along, it's going to work a lot more often than it won't. So, Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think with most automation tools, the ability to kind of put checks in place as well, right? So, for example, if you're automating an AP run to go out automatically, having metrics and having visibility into period over period changes, right? Was I expecting a 2% increase? Well, it's 5%. Should I go look at that information, right? And maybe it's a completely valid percentage increase. Some of the things that you can do is write these reports that are pretty simple to write at this point with most systems, especially within NetSuite, but to give you that analytics side of the house. Hey, it looks like I only sent out 10 vendor bills this period. Well, I was expecting more, right? You could talk to an AP clerk. She knows exactly, he or she knows exactly how much needs to be sent out that period, right? Because they just are living that information every month, right? So when you look at that information, it is trusting the process, but at the same time, putting the checks, putting the reports and the metrics around the process as part of the individual's day-to-day job. It is kind of looking for that trend like we talked about before, but also being able to, hey, everything look right here, right? Before closing out the period.
I think that leads great into another question that I had about, should people who work in finance be worried about job security as automation is becoming more prevalent?
The way I've kind of thought about it too is that if we look at, some of these tasks that we want to automate can be pretty monotonous tasks, right? You're looking at an Excel spreadsheet from one system, looking at another, doing some type of VLOOKUP to validate the data is working. Very kind of monotonous tasks that you, depending on the size of your business, could be hundreds of thousands to millions of rows of data. And the way that we kind of look at it, is automating those processes enables people to do, as Joe was saying, more value added benefits to their finance team rather than just keeping the lights on type of work. If you don't have to do things like audit those spreadsheets every month, you can do more things where you are analyzing the data to make sure, hey, it looks like there is an issue in this region related to shipments getting there at a certain time, or our collections are behind, our payment terms have dropped. Things like that in order to actually increase the predictability of the business and make it more of a proactive attribute rather than reactive.
I've seen some of those Excel spreadsheets where I've had to audit them and it's 20 tabs, right? Where one little data input can completely derail the entire workbook. Is this information right? And is this information valid? People are spending hours, every single month looking at this information. But then you can really turn that person, like Tyler said, to be more efficient in their day-to-day, which gives you the more time to actually do other activities. Maybe it's something that you want to do, right? Maybe you want to explore your current role, right? To expand inside the company. Maybe it's, to actually provide that value added service of, hey, something's going on in this part of the country. I've now spotted that. Like, what's your, kind of solutions for that? These people are living and they know every kind of piece of the pie. So it gives them that information, right? As opposed to like the day-to-day manual entry, to really focus on, one, is the data clean that comes through? Is this what we're expecting to happen? Accountants love numbers. So what's my period over period? I still look at it, right, as like what happened last month, what's going on this month, what's going to happen next month. And that ability to forecast into the future just really helps people. But it's really hard to do that if you're inside of an Excel system every single day.
Automation gives you the freedom to focus on other things and to make sure, and like you're saying, analyze and make sure that everything is going smoothly, and also that your business is doing well. And what could we do better? Let's play with these numbers here. So I love that. As someone is maybe looking into different programs or apps, when they're looking for these automation features, what should a customer be on the lookout for? In other words, like, what are signs of a good automation system?
Like with any product, whether you're a business or a consumer, right? Like, it needs to be solving your pain point. When you're on the lookout for a good automation system, it's really good to be aware of like, what is the problems that you are facing in your day-to-day business? Whenever you guys have those moments where you're sitting at the keyboard and you go, there has to be a better way. Those are the opportunities where we say, okay, like, we can automate this. And when you find a solution for it, the key is to make sure that you can control attributes. I like to think of it as like, what can you tinker with it, right? You should be able to control the volume of things that get automated. Is it a portion of your business? It's the entirety of your business. Is it specific subsidiaries, classifications, certain types of items that you sell, portions like that? You should be able to control it so that you can onboard the solution or the automation to your liking. And then secondly, that's kind of on the input, but on the engine of the automation itself, you should have flexibility to be able to configure how that data is getting processed. The systems that we see customers use that are the most successful is when they can really align them with their business processes as their business operates today and not have to rejigger their business too much to a system. And the systems that we find that don't work and people that we talk to, it's systems that want you to operate in one specific way, which might not fit for your industry or how your team works. So those are the kind of things I think that people should look out for.
To build upon the flexibility, I like to think of it as like dialing up the automation to really be tailored to your business. And depending on what side, is it on the AR side or the AP side? Do I want the invoice to go out automatically? Do I want my vendor bill to just be automatically paid? Does it go through one level of approval? Does it go through 7 levels of approval? I remember the days where it was literally a piece of paper that went around from AP clerk to AP manager to controller, right? And just sat on people's desks, right? So you're losing out on the automation. But now with automation is you can scale up the number of approval chains. Does it automatically get emailed to the CEO because it's over a certain threshold? But maybe the CEO doesn't live in the system. So you need that flexibility to maybe approve via email. And then if you think of it from a billing perspective is, hey, what invoices do we want to send to the customers automatically? Everyone is going to have that sensitive client that maybe you want to be hand delivered. Right? You still want someone to print it and go ahead and hand deliver it. But you need that ability to dial up the automation. And I like to think is companies shouldn't just put in a system, just automate tomorrow, right? And just be completely hands off. It's really to say, which portion of our business can we start automating today? Which ones can we slowly add in as phase 2, phase 3 to really get comfortable with the solution? Like we talked about, build those checks and balances around the solution as well, but really focus on, hey, we have a lot of enterprise customers, or we have a lot of customers that have exceptions. Maybe I never want those to go through, but now you're just managing a smaller task list. And now you're just focusing on making sure your white glove customers, your high ranking, or ones that are just more complex contracts by exception.
I love that. Great insights all around. Focus on flexibility and making sure you take your time, implement those checks and balances as you go. My last question for you is, how can a company really harness the power of automation?
You really need to make sure that you have a really great understanding of your business processes today, right? And why those processes are the way they are. People come in and they don't really, whether it's because of turnover within their company or whatever, they're not really sure why or they add value. Is it really a component of their business, or is it something that somebody had asked for at one time? So really understanding where you are today is really key to enable you to get to where you want to be in the future.
Yeah, I like to think of it as taking an outside look. I remember when I was working in finance and I was doing a month-end close process, there was an additional 7 tabs in this workbook that someone was doing every single month. And I was like, what are they doing? They literally didn't contribute to the end result that we were doing, but someone was doing it every single month. It didn't help the overall process or anything. So I was able to trim that up by taking that step back, looking at it. Right? But if you now apply that to systems, a lot of times you'll ask individuals, well, why are you pressing the button? Or why are you entering in invoices or payables manually? Well, that's because we get the data that way. And then to Tyler's point is, well, maybe it's a data hygiene issue, right? Maybe it's something that we just need to clean the data up to free up the automation. But you got to take that step back for a second, look at that overall process. What is the outcomes that we're trying to get to? And then we can say, okay, great. I know the final objective that we're getting to. Start from scratch. What's the most streamlined way of getting there? And now you can supplement your processes, your systems in place, making sure that you have the controls along the way. But now you can almost design it from scratch while leveraging the systems you have today. And you're going to see lots of opportunities. Oh, hey, if we got the data a little bit different, that's going to save us so much more time.
Well, Joe, Tyler, this has been a great conversation talking all about the possibilities that automation can bring to a business to help them grow, to keep them flexible, and to really free up employees to be more of a value add for the company. A lot of really exciting stuff. Thank you both for bringing your insight and your expertise to this conversation. It's been great having you both on the show.
Thanks so much for having us, Jake.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. This has been fun.
Now, we want to hear from you. Are you using automation to help your business grow? Let us know by emailing hello@zoneandco.com. Finance in the Clouds now posts bi-weekly on Fridays. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe to Finance in the Clouds wherever you get your podcasts, or watch us on YouTube on the Zone & Co YouTube channel. And we'll see you next time.